The world dissolved into a haze of red, not unlike the cheap wine they celebrated with. The eviction notice felt like a physical blow, the words blurring into a cruel mockery of the life I thought I had. Laughter echoed from behind the closed door, a symphony of betrayal conducted by the very woman who swore to protect me, my own mother. They thought they had won. They believed they had broken me beyond repair. If your mother is your guiding star, subscribe now to protect family. My name is Riley, and until recently, home was the sprawling Victorian house on Willow Creek Lane, the house my grandfather built and passed down through generations. It was more than just bricks and mortar, it was a repository of memories, a sanctuary filled with the aroma of Mom's apple pies and the echoes of childhood laughter. Dad had been gone for years, lost too soon to a sudden illness, leaving Mom as the sole guardian of our legacy. Or so I thought. After Dad departed from this world, Mom seemed different. Distant. She started spending more time with her friends, a gaggle of women with surgically enhanced features and a penchant for gossip. They were always whispering, always giggling, and always looking at me with thinly veiled disdain. I tried to connect with Mom, to bridge the growing chasm between us, but my efforts were met with cold indifference or, worse, outright hostility. Then came Mark, a slick, fast-talking real estate developer with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He charmed his way into Mom's life, showering her with expensive gifts and whispered promises. I didn't trust him from the start. There was something predatory about his gaze, a calculating glint that sent shivers down my spine. I voiced my concerns to Mom, but she dismissed them as jealousy, accusing me of trying to sabotage her happiness. "You're just afraid of being alone, Riley," she'd sneer, her voice dripping with venom. Well, guess what? I deserve to be happy, and Mark makes me happy. The changes started subtly. The house, once a warm and inviting space, began to feel sterile and impersonal. Mom replaced our worn furniture with sleek, modern pieces that looked like they belonged in a showroom. She redecorated my childhood bedroom, turning it into a guest suite. The photographs of Dad disappeared from the mantelpiece, replaced by glossy pictures of Mom and Mark on exotic vacations. And then came the proposition. Mom wanted to downsize, to sell the family home and move into a condo with Mark. She claimed it was for financial reasons, but I knew better. Mark had his eyes on the property, with its prime location and sprawling grounds. He saw dollar signs where I saw memories. I refused to sell. This house wasn't just an asset, it was my heritage, my connection to the past. Mom grew increasingly frustrated with my stubbornness, her anger simmering beneath a veneer of forced politeness. Mark, ever the charmer, tried to reason with me, offering me a generous sum of money in exchange for my cooperation. But I wouldn't budge. I knew that once the house was gone, a piece of me would disappear with it. So I did what any rational person would do. I started researching the legal ramifications, digging through old property deeds and consulting with lawyers. I discovered a loophole, a clause in my grandfather's will that granted me a partial ownership of the house upon my father's passing. Armed with this knowledge, I felt a glimmer of hope. I could protect my home, my legacy, from these vultures circling overhead. I presented my findings to Mom, expecting her to be relieved, to see the error of her ways. Instead, she erupted in a fit of rage, her face contorted with fury. "You little witch," she screamed. "How dare you try to undermine me?" Mark stood behind her, his eyes narrowed, his smile replaced by a cold, calculating stare. "You're not going to win this, Riley," he hissed. "We'll find a way to get rid of you." That night, I overheard them talking in the living room, their voices hushed but filled with malice. They were plotting, scheming, trying to find a way to evict me, to seize control of the house. I felt a cold dread creep into my heart. I was alone, vulnerable, and completely outmatched. The person I trusted most was one of them. The day they betrayed me was the day revenge was born. The eviction notice arrived a week later, a crisp white envelope containing my worst nightmare. The grounds for eviction were flimsy, fabricated accusations of property damage and disturbing the peace. Lies, all of them. But Mom and Mark were relentless, their legal team a well-oiled machine designed to crush any opposition. I tried to fight back, to gather evidence to refute their claims, but it was like trying to hold back a tidal wave with a bucket. Every avenue I explored led to a dead end, every witness I approached clammed up, intimidated by Mark's wealth and influence. My savings dwindled as I paid for legal consultations, each one more disheartening than the last. The lawyer I eventually hired, a weary-looking woman named Sarah, did her best, but she was fighting an uphill battle. "They have deep pockets, Riley," she warned me. "And they're not afraid to use them." Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. Night after night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with worry and despair. The house, once my sanctuary, now felt like a prison, the walls closing in on me, suffocating me. I could hear Mom and Mark downstairs, their laughter echoing through the halls, a constant reminder of their triumph. I started documenting everything, recording their conversations, taking pictures of any suspicious activity. I knew it was a long shot, but I had to do something, anything, to protect myself. The isolation was the hardest part. My friends, sensing the tension, started to distance themselves, uncomfortable with the drama unfolding in my life. I couldn't blame them. Who wants to be caught in the crossfire of a bitter family feud? I felt like I was drowning, gasping for air in a sea of betrayal and deceit. I tried to appeal to Mom, to reason with her, to remind her of the love we once shared. But her eyes were cold, devoid of any emotion. "It's too late, Riley," she said, her voice flat and indifferent. "You made your choice." Mark's presence in the house became increasingly intrusive. He would leer at me, his eyes lingering on my body, making me feel like a piece of meat. He would make subtle threats, veiled in the guise of concern. "You know, Riley," he'd say, his voice dripping with false sympathy, "it's a shame you're being so stubborn. This could all be so easy if you just cooperated." I started carrying pepper spray, my hand constantly hovering near my purse, ready to defend myself. The atmosphere in the house was toxic, thick with tension and unspoken animosity. I felt like I was walking on eggshells, afraid to say or do anything that might provoke Mom and Mark's wrath. One afternoon, I came home to find my belongings piled on the front lawn. The locks had been changed, and a security guard stood watch, preventing me from entering the house. I was officially homeless, cast out by the very woman who brought me into this world. Humiliated and defeated, I dragged my suitcases to a cheap motel on the outskirts of town. The room was dingy and smelled of stale smoke, but it was a roof over my head. As I lay on the lumpy mattress, staring at the water-stained ceiling, I felt a surge of anger rise within me. They had taken everything from me, my home, my family, my sense of security. But they wouldn't break me. I would fight back. I would make them pay. I stayed silent. They thought I was done. But I was counting every second. I began to meticulously document every interaction with Mom and Mark. Every phone call, every email, every fleeting encounter was recorded and catalogued. I visited the local library, poring over legal texts and property laws, educating myself on my rights and their potential liabilities. I discovered inconsistencies in the paperwork they had filed with the court, discrepancies that suggested fraudulent activity. A flicker of hope ignited within me. I reached out to old family friends, people who had known my father and grandfather. I shared my story, my voice trembling with emotion, and asked for their help. Some turned me away, afraid of getting involved. But others listened, their eyes filled with sympathy and understanding. They provided me with valuable information, corroborating my suspicions about Mark's shady business dealings and Mom's increasingly erratic behavior. One evening, while sifting through my father's old files, I stumbled upon a hidden compartment in his desk. Inside, I found a stack of letters, yellowed with age, addressed to my mother from a woman I had never heard of. The letters revealed a long-standing affair, a secret that had been buried for years. I felt a surge of anger and betrayal. My father, the man I had idolized, had been unfaithful to my mother. Could this be the reason for her bitterness, her coldness? Was she projecting her own guilt onto me? This discovery, while painful, gave me a new perspective on Mom's actions. It didn't excuse her behavior, but it helped me understand it. The weight of injustice pressed down on me, each sleepless night a testament to their cruelty, but I refused to break. I would use their secrets against them. I needed allies. People who believed in me, people who were willing to stand up to Mom and Mark's bullying tactics. I reconnected with Sarah, my lawyer, and shared my findings with her. She was impressed by my tenacity and dedication. "You've done your homework, Riley," she said, a hint of admiration in her voice. This could be enough to turn the tide. Sarah helped me file a countersuit, accusing Mom and Mark of fraud, harassment, and emotional distress. The legal battle intensified, the stakes growing higher with each passing day. Mom and Mark retaliated with a barrage of personal attacks, attempting to discredit me in the eyes of the court and the community. They spread rumors about my mental health, portraying me as unstable and delusional. They even tried to gain custody of my beloved family dog, Max, claiming that I was unfit to care for him. Their cruelty knew no bounds. Despite the constant setbacks and challenges, I refused to give up. I was fighting for my home, my family's legacy, and my own sanity. I knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but I was determined to see it through to the end. The thought of them getting away with their treachery fueled my resolve. This wasn't just about a house anymore, it was about justice, about holding them accountable for their actions. The trial date loomed, a black cloud hanging over my head. The legal fees were mounting, draining what little resources I had left. Sarah, bless her heart, was working tirelessly, but even she seemed to be losing hope. "They're playing dirty, Riley," she said one afternoon, her voice weary. "I'm not sure how much longer we can hold out." The pressure was relentless. I received anonymous phone calls in the middle of the night, the caller breathing heavily, then hanging up. My car tires were slashed. I found a dead bird on my doorstep, a grim warning of what was to come. I was living in a constant state of fear, my nerves frayed, my body exhausted. Then came the day I lost Max. I had left him in the motel room while I went to meet with Sarah, only to return and find the door ajar and Max gone. Panic seized me. Max was my only companion, my only source of comfort in this nightmare. I searched everywhere, calling his name until my voice was hoarse, plastering lost dog posters all over town. But he was nowhere to be found. I knew, deep down, that Mom and Mark were behind it. They had taken him to hurt me, to break me completely. The grief was unbearable. I felt like a part of me had been ripped away. I returned to my motel room, a hollow shell of my former self. I sat on the bed, staring blankly at the wall, tears streaming down my face. I had lost everything. My home, my family, my dog. I was alone, utterly and completely alone. The darkness threatened to consume me. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't even bring myself to get out of bed. The eviction notice felt like a brand on my soul. My vision blurred, not from tears, but from a rising fury. They wanted me gone, erased. They thought they had won. A wave of nausea washed over me, and I stumbled to the bathroom, emptying the contents of my stomach into the toilet. As I knelt there, retching, I saw my reflection in the mirror, gaunt, pale, with dark circles under my eyes. I barely recognized myself. Was this what they wanted? To reduce me to nothing? A broken, defeated shell of a person? Something snapped within me. A spark of defiance ignited in the ashes of despair. No. I wouldn't let them win. I wouldn't let them destroy me. I would fight back, harder than ever before. I stood up, my legs trembling, and washed my face. I looked at myself in the mirror again, this time with a newfound resolve. The girl who had been cowering in fear was gone. In her place stood a woman fueled by anger, determined to seek justice. It was time to stop playing defense and go on the offensive. I would use their own weapons against them. I would expose their lies, their deceit, their corruption. I would make them pay for what they had done to me. The first thing I did was contact a private investigator. I had very little money left, but I managed to scrape together enough for a retainer. I needed someone on the inside, someone who could dig up dirt on Mom and Mark without being detected. The investigator, a grizzled ex-cop named Jack, was skeptical at first. But after hearing my story, he agreed to take the case. "I've seen worse, kid," he said, his voice gruff but kind. "Don't you worry. We'll get those scumbags." Jack started digging into Mark's business dealings, uncovering a web of shady investments and fraudulent transactions. He also discovered that Mark was heavily in debt, owing money to some very dangerous people. The information was like a lifeline, a glimmer of hope in the darkness. I felt a surge of adrenaline, a sense of purpose that I hadn't felt in months. I was no longer just a victim, I was a warrior, ready to fight for what was rightfully mine. I started spending hours online, researching Mom and Mark's past. I scoured social media, old newspaper articles, public records, anything that might give me an edge. I discovered that Mom had a history of gambling addiction, a secret she had kept hidden for years. And that Mark had been previously accused of fraud, although the charges had been dropped due to lack of evidence. Each new discovery fueled my determination. I was building a case, piece by piece, a mountain of evidence that would bury them both. I knew I had to be careful. Mom and Mark were watching me, waiting for me to make a mistake. I couldn't let them know what I was planning. I started acting differently, feigning despair, pretending to give up. I wanted them to think they had broken me, that I was no longer a threat. It was an act, a carefully crafted performance designed to lull them into a false sense of security. And it worked. They started to relax, their guard dropping ever so slightly. They thought they had won. But they were wrong. The exact day they tried to end me, I exposed the truth. Their biggest weakness? They thought they were untouchable. I smiled. I acted broken. But I was recording everything. I smiled. I played their game. But I was recording everything. Hidden cameras became my best friends. I rigged the motel room with them, focusing on the entrance and any windows. I needed proof that they were involved in Max's disappearance, and any other attempts to intimidate me. I also purchased a small, discreet voice recorder, which I kept on me at all times. Any interaction with Mom or Mark, no matter how insignificant it seemed, was meticulously documented. I even started wearing a small body camera disguised as a button on my shirt, ensuring I caught everything when I inevitably saw them. The thought of justice, of exposing their deceit, was the only thing keeping me going. I started researching the laws surrounding evidence gathering, making sure everything I collected would be admissible in court. I learned about chain of custody, proper documentation, and the importance of maintaining a clear and unbroken record. I even consulted with a forensic expert, who advised me on how to preserve digital evidence and prevent tampering. My entire life became consumed by this plan. One afternoon, while reviewing the camera footage from the motel room, I noticed something peculiar. A black sedan, with tinted windows, had been parked across the street for several hours. It was the same car that had been following me for the past few weeks. I zoomed in on the license plate, managing to capture a partial number. I ran the number through a private database, discovering that the car was registered to a shell corporation with ties to Mark. My heart pounded in my chest. This was it. This was the proof I needed to connect them to the harassment. I immediately contacted Jack, the private investigator, and shared my findings with him. He was thrilled. "This is gold, Riley," he said. "This could blow the whole case wide open." He promised to dig deeper, to uncover the connection between Mark and the black sedan. The next few days were a blur of activity. I worked with Jack, providing him with every piece of evidence I had collected. He, in turn, provided me with invaluable information, confirming my suspicions about Mark's fraudulent business dealings and Mom's gambling addiction. We were a team, working together to bring them down. It was exhilarating and terrifying at the same time. I knew that Mom and Mark were getting suspicious. They started watching me more closely, their eyes filled with suspicion and distrust. I could feel their gaze on me, even when they weren't physically present. The tension in the air was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. I had to be extra careful, to avoid making any mistakes that might reveal my plan. I continued to play the part of the broken, defeated victim, but inside, I was seething with anger and determination. I knew that the final confrontation was coming, and I had to be ready. I spent hours rehearsing what I would say, visualizing the moment when I would expose their lies. I imagined the look on their faces when they realized that I had outsmarted them, that their carefully constructed world was about to crumble. The anticipation was almost unbearable. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Mom called me one evening, her voice uncharacteristically sweet. She invited me to dinner at the house, saying that she wanted to talk things over, to try and reach some kind of resolution. I was immediately suspicious. This was a trap, I knew it. But I also knew that I couldn't refuse. This was my chance to gather more evidence, to catch them off guard. I accepted the invitation, but I made sure to bring my voice recorder and body camera with me. I arrived at the house, my heart pounding in my chest. The atmosphere was thick with tension. Mom and Mark greeted me at the door, their smiles strained and unnatural. We sat down at the dining table, and Mom began to speak, her voice dripping with false sincerity. She apologized for her behavior, saying that she had been under a lot of stress lately. She blamed Mark for influencing her, for turning her against me. I listened patiently, my eyes narrowed, my mind racing. I knew she was lying, but I played along, pretending to believe her. Then Mark spoke, his voice smooth and calculating. He offered me a deal, a way to settle the dispute and avoid a costly legal battle. He offered me a sum of money in exchange for signing a document relinquishing my claim to the house. I knew this was their endgame. They wanted to get rid of me, to silence me forever. But I wasn't going to let them. I took a deep breath and smiled. "I have something I want to share," I said, my voice calm and steady. I reached into my purse and pulled out a USB drive. "Everything you've done, all the lies, the deceit, the harassment, it's all on here." I plugged the USB drive into my laptop, which I had conveniently placed on the table. The screen flickered to life, displaying a folder filled with videos, audio recordings, and documents. Mom and Mark's faces turned pale. They knew they were caught. I pressed play on the first video. It was a recording of them discussing their plan to evict me, to seize control of the house. Their voices, filled with malice and contempt, echoed through the room. The truth was out. I exposed their lies. They were not untouchable. The room went silent. The only sound was the whirring of the laptop fan. I watched their faces. Mom's carefully constructed mask of sweetness crumbled, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated panic. Mark's eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape, but there was nowhere to run. The laptop displayed it all. There they were, plotting my downfall, their voices dripping with disdain. There was footage of Mark arranging the accident that nearly took me out. The threats, the lies, the manipulation, all laid bare for the world to see. The USB drive contained irrefutable evidence of their crimes. But the real kicker, the thing that would truly shatter their world, wasn't just the recordings. It was the financial records Jack had dug up, detailing Mark's elaborate scheme to defraud investors and funnel money into offshore accounts. The documents also revealed Mom's crippling gambling debts, and the lengths she'd gone to cover them up, including using the house as collateral. Their weakness? Greed. The belief that money could solve any problem, buy any silence. They underestimated me. They thought I was just a naive kid, easily manipulated. They were wrong. So wrong. I watched as the color drained from Mark's face. His hands trembled, and he reached out to grab Mom's arm, as if seeking reassurance. But she was frozen, her eyes fixated on the laptop screen, her face a mask of horror. He stammered, trying to deny the obvious, but the words caught in his throat. He lunged forward, attempting to snatch the laptop from the table, but I was quicker. I grabbed it first, holding it out of his reach. "Don't even think about it," I said, my voice cold and steady. "It's already been backed up. And sent to a few very interested parties." I wasn't bluffing. Sarah, my lawyer, had copies of everything. And so did Jack, the private investigator. They were ready to unleash the evidence the moment I gave the word. He stumbled back, his face contorted with rage. "You little witch," he spat, his voice dripping with venom. "You think you've won? This isn't over." Mom finally found her voice, her tone a mixture of desperation and anger. "Riley, please," she begged. "We can work this out. Just turn off the laptop. We can forget this ever happened." Forget it ever happened? After everything they had put me through? After stealing my home, my dog, and trying to destroy my life? There was no way. I stood up, the laptop clutched tightly in my hands. "It's over," I said, my voice echoing in the silent room. "You lost. And now, you're going to pay." I turned to leave, but as I reached the door, Mark blocked my path. His eyes were bloodshot, his face twisted into a grotesque mask of fury. "You're not going anywhere," he growled, grabbing my arm. "You're going to delete those files, right now." I struggled against his grip, but he was too strong. He dragged me back into the room, pushing me towards the table. Mom stood by, watching helplessly, her face etched with fear. He towered over me, his breath hot and stale on my face. "Delete them," he screamed, his grip tightening on my arm. "Or you'll regret it." My mind raced. I had to get out of there, to escape before he did something drastic. I scanned the room, searching for a weapon, anything to defend myself. But there was nothing. I was trapped. cornered like an animal. But then, I saw it. A small, silver letter opener, lying on the desk next to the laptop. It was my chance. In one swift motion, I kicked him in the shin, hard. He held in pain, momentarily releasing his grip. I lunged for the letter opener, grabbing it just as he reached for me again. I spun around, holding the letter opener out in front of me, my hand shaking. "Stay back!" I shouted, my voice trembling. "I'm not afraid to use this." He hesitated, his eyes fixed on the letter opener. He knew I meant business. He took a step back, his face a mask of fury and frustration. "You think that little thing is going to stop me?" he sneered. "I could snap you in half." I knew he was right. I was no match for him physically. But I had something he didn't have, the truth. And I was willing to do whatever it took to protect it. "Try me," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "See what happens." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. We stood there, locked in a silent standoff, neither of us willing to back down. Then, suddenly, the front door burst open, and a voice shattered the silence. "Police! Freeze! Don't move!" It was Jack, the private investigator, accompanied by 2 uniformed officers. He had called them. He knew I was in danger. My knees buckled in relief. Help had arrived. But as the officers moved to apprehend Mark, something unexpected happened. Mom grabbed the letter opener from my hand and... The world seemed to slow down as Mom grabbed the letter opener. Her face was a mask of conflicted emotions, fear, regret, and a desperate kind of love that had been twisted and corrupted. Instead of turning the blade on me, as I initially feared, she turned toward Mark. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by her ragged breath. With a primal scream, a sound ripped from the depths of her soul, she lunged at him. It happened so fast. One moment Mark was yelling, the next he was gasping, clutching his chest as a crimson stain blossomed on his shirt. The officers, stunned by the sudden turn of events, reacted instantly, wresting the letter opener from her grasp and pinning her to the ground. Mark staggered backward, his eyes wide with disbelief and pain. He looked at Mom, a question in his gaze, a desperate plea for understanding, but found only a hollow emptiness. Then he collapsed, his body hitting the floor with a sickening thud. The crimson spread, staining the carpet, a stark testament to the unraveling of their carefully constructed lies. The police swarmed the room, their voices a blur of commands and questions. I stood frozen, my mind struggling to process the chaos unfolding before me. Mom, her face streaked with tears and crimson, stared blankly at the ceiling, her eyes devoid of all emotion. Mark lay motionless on the floor, his life extinguished by the very woman he had manipulated and controlled for so long. The air crackled with shock and disbelief, the weight of what had just happened crushing down on us all. The aftermath was a whirlwind of police interviews, forensic investigations, and legal proceedings. Mom was taken into custody, charged with Mark's unaliving, her fate hanging precariously in the balance. The evidence I had gathered, the recordings, the documents, the photos, all played a crucial role in piecing together the events that had led to this tragic climax. The truth emerged, stark and undeniable, exposing Mark's fraudulent business dealings, Mom's gambling addiction, and their conspiracy to silence me. The media descended, turning our private tragedy into a public spectacle. The house, once a symbol of our family's prosperity, became a crime scene, a grim reminder of the darkness that had festered within its walls. I found myself thrust into the spotlight, a reluctant witness to the downfall of my own family. The weight of it all was immense, the emotional toll almost unbearable. But amidst the chaos and the heartbreak, I felt a sense of grim satisfaction. The truth was out. Their lies had been exposed. They were no longer untouchable. Mark's empire crumbled, his reputation tarnished, his legacy forever stained by his deceit. His business partners, realizing the extent of his fraud, distanced themselves, scrambling to salvage what they could. His assets were seized, his offshore accounts frozen, his ill-gotten gains stripped away. He left behind a trail of broken promises and shattered lives, a testament to the destructive power of greed and ambition. Mom, facing the consequences of her actions, was consumed by remorse and regret. She had lost everything: her husband, her freedom, and her daughter's love. The gambling addiction that had plagued her for so long had finally led her to ruin, destroying everything she held dear. In the end, she pleaded guilty, accepting responsibility for her role in Mark's unaliving. She was sentenced to a lengthy prison term, a fitting punishment for the devastation she had wrought. As she was led away, she looked at me, her eyes filled with a desperate plea for forgiveness. I couldn't offer it. Not yet. The wounds were still too fresh, the pain too deep. I sold the house. Every room held memories, tainted with lies and betrayal. I used the money to start over, far away from the shadows of my past. I honored Max's memory, creating a foundation in his name to help other animals. I went back to school, determined to build a new life, one based on honesty and integrity. I learned to trust again, to open my heart to love and friendship. It wasn't easy. The scars remained, a constant reminder of the darkness I had endured. But I refused to let it define me. I emerged from the ashes, stronger and more resilient than ever before. The exact day they tried to end me, I exposed the truth. They lost everything. I just smiled. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. It's a survival mechanism, a way to reclaim your power when someone tries to steal it from you. It's not about inflicting pain, it's about seeking justice, about holding people accountable for their actions. It's about protecting yourself and those you love from further harm. It's about healing. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more stories of justice.